I want to thank everybody for being here this morning. Before we get started on my comments, I'd like to introduce Tom Albus, who's the first Assistant Attorney General in our office. Tom led this investigation along with Jeremiah Morgan, who's the Deputy Attorney General in our office, along with several other lawyers in our office and staff. About a year ago, my predecessor announced that he was launching an investigation into the allegations of sexual abuse by members of the 4 Roman Catholic dioceses in Missouri, and the allegations of the cover-up that followed. One of the first actions we took when I was sworn into office in January was to engage in a deliberate and thoughtful review of the serious allegations in a victim-centric way. Our mandate: determine if there's credible information and evidence from which our office could make referrals and recommendations for local prosecutors. While we have been acutely aware that victims and our citizens have asked for information as quickly as possible, we believe that the issue is so important we wanted to provide a report that was as thorough and as actionable as possible. Today, we're announcing that we've identified 12 cases of alleged abuse to be referred to local prosecutors for possible prosecution. We believe that this represents more criminal referrals for prosecution than any other Attorney General's office has made in the country. If there are cases in which local prosecutors should seek our assistance, we stand ready, willing, and able to assist them. By way of background, let me provide some context to what our investigation entailed. During the course of our investigation, we reviewed every single available personnel report from every priest serving in the Archdiocese of St. Louis, the Diocese of Kansas City, St. Joseph, the Diocese of Springfield, Cape Girardeau, and the Diocese of Jefferson City, dating back to 1945. In all, our review involved the records of more than 2,000 priests. We also reviewed the records of more than 300 deacons, seminarians, and religious women. We spoke with all the survivors of abuse and/or their family members who answered our office's call. And we reviewed numerous reports submitted to our office, often anonymously, dealing with the human toll of these tragedies. As a result, we are releasing today, for the first time seen anywhere and available for public view, a summarization of this comprehensive review of all Missouri diocesan clergy records, the first to which have been undertaken by any organization outside of the Roman Catholic Church. Before releasing the specifics, I would like to provide some overarching comments. Sexual abuse by minors by members of Missouri's 4 Roman Catholic dioceses has been a far-reaching and sustained scandal. No region of the state of Missouri has been spared. For decades, faced with credible reports of abuse, the Church refused to acknowledge the victims and instead focused their efforts on protecting priests. For decades, the responsibility for evaluating and responding to reports of abuse and misconduct was controlled by a small circle of priests and diocesan leadership and the bishops. Lay members of the Church were generally not informed of the reports. The standard response to reports of abuse was simply to move an offending priest into short-term treatment and then reassign him. Meanwhile, the priest's old and new parishes were never informed. While since 2002, the Church of Missouri in Missouri has implemented a series of reforms, this report recommends additional reforms to strengthen oversight and protect victims from additional abuse. In all, our investigation has identified 163 members of the clergy against whom exists substantial evidence of sexual abuse or misconduct against minors. We include each of these in this report without detailing personal information so as to comply with state, federal, statutory, and constitutional law. Of the 163 cases, 83 of the clergy members are deceased. Of the 80 cases remaining, 46 of those clergy members' conduct is outside the statute of limitation for criminal prosecution under Missouri law. 1 case is still under investigation by the Church. 15 cases have previously been filed in criminal court. 5 cases have been or are currently being investigated by law enforcement, which leaves the 12 cases that we will refer for criminal prosecution. Again, as noted, we're providing more information today than has ever been made public before, but we are still limited to certain details we can provide, like names, because of state and federal law. But make no mistake, we will refer the following cases for potential criminal prosecution. Priest number 3, Accused in 2009 of sexual misconduct involving inappropriate communication with elementary school-age child in 2004. The priest was removed from ministry temporarily and later removed from active ministry. Diocese sought to remove him from the priesthood permanently, but priest number 3 did not consent. The priest is currently limited to prayer and penance. We will refer this case for potential criminal prosecution. Priest number 7 admitted to the allegation of abuse and molestation of high school-aged seminarian in 1996. In 2004, additional reports of molestation of high school-aged seminarians was determined to be credible. The priest was removed from his ministry in 2003 and allowed to retire. He appears to have been allowed to relocate outside of the United States. We will also refer this case for potential criminal prosecution. Priest number 10. Reports of numerous acts of sexual misconduct, boundary issues, inappropriate contact received by an anonymous letter in 2012 and continuing through 2017. In 2016, the priest was placed on leave while the diocese is pursuing removing him from the priesthood. We will also refer this case for criminal prosecution. Priest number 13, reports of a long-term pattern of sexual abuse of high school-aged children to which he admitted. Priest abandoned the ministry in 1991 and his whereabouts are unknown. Proceedings to remove him from the priesthood were undertaken by the diocese in 2018. We will also refer this case for criminal prosecution. Priest number 16, reports of long-term sexual abuse of a high school-aged child over the course of several years from 1986 to 1993. This was reported to the diocese in 1996. The priest was removed from the ministry. A second report of abuse occurring in 1995 was received in 2005. We will also refer this case for criminal prosecution. Priest number 18, report in 2015 detailed unwarranted and inappropriate hugging and kissing of elementary school child. Priest was removed from ministry but later allowed to return. It was determined that his behavior did not violate the 2002 charter. Priest appears to have left the United States. We are also referring this case for criminal prosecution. Priest number 23, taken out of ministry in 1994 after complaints unrelated to sexual abuse or misconduct. Priest returned to the ministry and was given a leadership post in the diocese. In 1997, the diocese received numerous reports of boundary issue violations against elementary school-aged children, including unwanted and inappropriate touching. Following an investigation, the priest was temporarily then permanently removed from public ministry and granted retirement. Reports are that the priest is engaged in priestly ministry outside of the state of Missouri. We will also refer this case for criminal prosecution. Priest number 50. Report indicates that fellow priests were aware of apparent consensual sexual conduct being undertaken by the priest with an adult in the early 1970s, but did not raise them with the diocese until after the report of the priest's abuse of minors was received. Reports of abuse occurring later than the 1970s were received in 2002. The process to remove him from the priesthood was undertaken in 2013. Even though the priest left the diocese in 1989 without authorization, church procedures require an effort to contact the priest to allow him to participate in the process. Files do not indicate any efforts beyond mail correspondence to physically locate the priest and return him to the diocese for discipline. We are also referring this case for criminal prosecution. Priest number 74, numerous allegations of sexual abuse of minors. A 1982 report led to the suspension of the priest from the ministry from 1982 through 1984, after which he was returned to active ministry with restrictions on interactions with youth. Sexual misconduct again alleged in 1998, after which the priest was removed from ministry and retired. After a public announcement of allegations against the priest were made in 2002, additional accounts of sexual misconduct at diocesan high schools were lodged. The priest was removed from the priesthood in 2006. We will also refer this case for criminal prosecution. Priest number 80. Multiple reports of sexual misconduct with minors occurred in the 1960s and the 1970s were received after the priest retired in 2011. Records do not indicate if the priest is under any restrictions from public ministry. We will also refer this case for criminal prosecution. Priest number 120. Report of abuse received in 1996. Abuse occurred in 1992 and involved a high school-aged child. Report indicated victim was forcibly abused. In 1997, priest number 120 was placed on temporary leave, but allowed to relocate outside the United States and serve as a missionary. Priest number 120 publicly denied committing any abuse. We will also refer this case for criminal prosecution. Priest number 130, a report of sexual abuse of a high school-age child was received in 1993. The abuse occurred in 1973 while the priest was in seminary. Priest 130 was temporarily absent from seminary studies and later deemed safe for the ministry in 1994. He was assigned to high school teaching and was found in 1997 to be in violation of his safety plan and placed on leave. Between 2002 and 2004, many additional reports of sexual abuse of high school-age children were reported. He was removed from the priesthood in 2004. We will also refer this case for criminal prosecution. This concludes the description of the cases we will refer to local prosecutors. Moving forward, we want to do everything that we can do to ensure that children and their families can feel safe and protected. Therefore, we're providing concrete recommendations for what the church should do to protect the citizens and the faithful of our state, particularly our most vulnerable. Number one, dioceses should assume greater responsibility and oversight over all religious order priests and priests visiting or relocating from other dioceses. Number two, dioceses should ensure that their independent review boards are composed entirely of lay people, and their determinations of credibility and sanctions will be given authoritative weight with respect to the ability of an offending priest to minister in its diocese. Number three, the diocese and the independent review boards should actively reconsider reports filed prior to 2002 and should review all past claims and subject them to the heightened 2002 charter standards. Number four, in the cases where offending priests who have had reports of abuse substantiated by the independent review board, their decision and the decision of the diocese to seek to remove the offending priest should be publicly disclosed without delay. And finally, number five, we recommend that a robust program on the notification and supervision of priests removed from public ministry or from the clerical state should be undertaken. In addition, our hotline, the Attorney General's hotline, will remain open, and we encourage any additional input from victims. Let me just say on a personal note, I can tell you as a father of young children and a lifelong member of the Catholic Church, my heart absolutely breaks for the victims of this widespread abuse and cover-up from the very people we've entrusted with our spiritual lives. While the Church instituted a number of meaningful reforms in 2002, that does not in any way diminish the pain of the abuse, the traumatic memories, the depression, in some cases suicide, and other lifelong impacts of the acts of some members of the clergy and the actions of the Church to cover it up. The betrayal of trust and of innocence is devastating, and in many instances, incomprehensible. I also want to thank the brave victims who've had the courage to come forward and share their stories. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to speak directly to the victims. You didn't deserve this. None of this was your fault. This report, our referrals for criminal prosecution, our aggressive and substantive recommendations for reform can erase the past, but they can change the trajectory of the future. It can lead to people being brought to justice and hopefully make sure that this never happens again. I'd like to at this time bring forward Tom Albus. Tom Albus is my first assistant here in the Attorney General's office. Tom was in the U.S. Attorney's Office for 17 years prior to joining our team in January. In addition to Tom being a great lawyer, a good man, one of the reasons I recruited Tom to join the office was so that he could lead investigations like this, big investigations. So without any further ado, Tom Albus.
Thank you, General Schmitt. I just want to speak briefly by way of thanking you all for being here and helping us get this information. And the reason why we've done that is because the investigation, the whole team that worked on this in the Attorney General's office has been animated by the victims who came forward.